Before I tell this story, want to let you know, anytime that I say this word, it is going to mean this word. I'm not trying to be ridiculous, it's just what I have to do. It is super hard not to say that word when I'm telling this story. I've already tried. But we got an email from a friend who said that we could call her Christy, and she said that when you are around loss enough, it knows you almost like it's an old friend. Do go on. In her email, Christy goes on to write that she works at a veterinary clinic. She is an LVT, so she said that she has been there and experienced a lot of loss throughout her career. She said that the first few times where she experienced a loss, it actually really did affect her deeply, and then as time went on, it just started to become part of her normal day. She said that it was a daily occurrence and it just happened. Christy said that anytime a client would come in and it would be considered like a loss, they would go into the room and they would complete the procedure, and she always said that during that time she always felt like there was like something standing in the corner that would just watch and wait. It wasn't so much an ominous feeling as it was just something watching and waiting. If you see something moving in the back seat, that's just my dog Tucker, and also my son treats my car like a trap house, so whatever. Christy said that even though she would have this feeling like something was standing there and watching them from the corner of the room, she never physically saw anything. It was just a feeling that she had. Christy told me that the clinic that she worked at had a clinic cat named Mr. Pickles. Stop. But she said that Mr. Pickles was very old. He had been around for a really long time. Mr. Pickles had lived at the clinic his entire life, so this is where he was comfortable. Even when he did get into his elevated years, this is where he would stay. It was his home. And because he lived in a clinic, he received the best medical care possible. But as with all things, even with the best medical care possible, as things age, they decline. Christy did give us a little bit of an ode to Mr. Pickles, and she said that he was the cat who knew when someone needed to be comforted. Like, he didn't go up to every single person, but if someone was there and they were having a hard time or they were getting some really bad news, for some reason, Mr. Pickles was always really drawn to these people. Even when he was old and it was difficult for him to get around, he would still seek out the people who needed to be comforted and would still walk to them. Working at the clinic, Christy said that she was a morning person, so she always volunteered for the early morning shifts to be the first person there, get everything opened up, let the animals out who were staying there that were hospitalized, let Mr. Pickles out, make sure that he was good for the day, just get everything up and running before the rest of the staff came in. So every night when the staff would go home, they would put Mr. Pickles upstairs in their break room and they would shut the door, because the downstairs and the rest of the clinic was like monitored by a security system, because they do have controlled substances in there. So the only place where he could freely move around would be locked inside of like their staff lounge. And she said there were couches, TVs, he had his own bed. He was fine. But Christy said she would get there in the morning, she would come in, she would disable the security system, she would put her stuff down at the front desk, and then she would head upstairs to let Mr. Pickles out for the day. One morning, Christy gets to work, she's the first one there as usual, and she goes through that morning routine. She walks up the stairs, and as she's running the hallway, she looks into their staff room, like their break area where Mr. Pickles sleeps every night. And she says that she kind of freezes because she actually notices that there's movement in there because the door is half glass. So it's one of those doors, glass at the top, wood at the bottom. So she can physically see into the staff room, but she sees movement in there and she's thinking, hold on a second. She's trying to figure out exactly what she's looking at. She's like, okay, well, maybe this is Mr. Pickles. But she said, no, it was too tall to be Mr. Pickles because she could see a humanoid figure from like here up through this glass that she was looking through. She says she starts running through things in her head. And she's like, okay, I know that there's no one here before me because I had to disable the security system. I know that there's no possible way that anyone has broken in because if they did, they would have tripped the security system. At this point, she says she's about 25 feet away from this glass, so she actually steps a little bit closer. It's still dark, and the thing or whatever she's looking at in there is not acknowledging her, but she's like, if this is a person, like, I've got to figure out, what am I doing here? She says she walks until she's about 15 feet away, and she looks in there, and she looks at this thing, and she said, yeah, it's humanoid, except not humanoid. She said the best way that she can describe what she was looking at, it was like a 3D shadow. It was wispy, like black smoke coming off of it. It was not, like, you couldn't see through it, and where there should have been a face, it was just a hooded void. At this point in her email, Christy told me that she has no idea what she is looking at. She is thinking, okay, I need to call someone, but she had left her purse downstairs on the front desk where she always left it, and that's where her cell phone was. In order to get to another phone inside of the clinic, she would have to go into one of the offices, which was 10 feet back and across the hallway. She would also have to then unlock the office door, but unlocking the office door was not something that she did every morning because it wasn't her office. So the keys that she had to unlock all of the doors were also downstairs in her purse because the only key that she needed was this key to the staff room. She's running through her mind. What do I do next? Do I go get the keys? Do I go and run to get my cell phone? And then she notices this thing starts to move. Christy decides the best thing she can do is get to a phone, whether it be in the office, whether it be downstairs. She doesn't care. So she takes one step backwards. As soon as she moves, she said that this thing's head jerks up. She still can't see a face, just looks like a hooded void, but she can just tell this thing is looking at her. This thing is staring at her. She says she's taking in everything that's going on, and in the staff room there's a table which is about like, you know, waist high, and she says that she sees something jump onto the table, and she's thinking, oh my gosh, it's Mr. Pickles. Says that this thing breaks eye contact with her and turns towards Mr. Pickles, and she says it looks like a tendril of smoke, not a hand, reaches out and just kind of pets Mr. Pickles. At this point, it is still dark, so she can only really see shadow, but she can see like the morning light coming through their staff windows, and it's not permeating these things. Like, it's not coming through these things. It's just blacker than black darkness. She's standing there frozen, and she says that this thing looks at her one more time, and she says that when it does, she doesn't feel any sense of fear. She actually feels a sense of familiarity. It says almost like whatever is looking at her is just an old friend. She says that this thing inclines its head, and just as fast as it was there, it was gone. At this point, Christy is like, I gotta get to Mr. Pickles, which fair enough. I would do the same thing. I love Mr. Pickles. I never met Mr. Pickles, but I love him. So she grabs her keys and she runs to the staff room. She unlocks the door. She flips the light on. She sees Mr. Pickles laying there on his bed, and she goes over to him and she finds that he is gone, which she said she kind of already knew. Because the thing that she was looking at inside that staff room, that black wispy shadow and the little shadow that it was petting, she said the sense of familiarity that she got was just like something was standing in the corner of the room, watching and waiting, not ominous. At this point, she is still the only one who is in the clinic, and she says that when she finds Mr. Pickles, she just picks him up and she just cries. She says she cries some more, and she's just crying ugly tears, and she's crying for Mr. Pickles, and she says she is crying for the hundreds of other animals that she has watched leave this world and not cried over and not felt anything over. It was like all of these emotions just came flooding out of her. She said she hadn't cried. She hadn't cried for the losses, you know, since the beginning of her career. And she said that it just becomes something that just becomes a norm in your day. She said it just became a normal part of her day to watch the light leave something's eyes and then just carry its shell. No feeling, no emotion, no sadness. Because when you see enough loss, it becomes a living thing. It becomes something that you sit with, and you no longer feel the sadness that you're supposed to feel. She says as she was sitting there letting all of these emotions out, it just came to her that she knew exactly what she saw. She saw loss personified. In her email, she wrote, maybe I saw the Grim Reaper. Maybe something different comes for animals, and that's what I saw. She doesn't know. She said that after the loss of Mr. Pickles, the clinic was a really quiet, really sad place. They were never able to find another animal to fill that void who had like that sixth sense that Mr. Pickles did about who needed to be comforted, or anyone who, or any other animal that felt like comfortable within the clinic, like it was their home. And she said that if an animal didn't feel that way, it was just cruel to leave them alone all night if that's not where they wanted to be. So any animal that they would bring in to try to make like a new clinic cat, they would eventually end up finding it a home, or it would go live with one of the staff. After Christy experienced this, she said that anytime that she does assist with a loss, as far as like the procedure, she will still feel like someone is standing in the corner of the room watching. She'll glance over, but she doesn't see anything. She said she's still not sure what she saw that day. She said maybe it was a glitch. Maybe loss knows you as well if you know it and you spend enough time around it, and maybe it felt comfortable enough with her to show itself, or maybe it just didn't feel her presence because it was so used to her being around all the time that it slipped up. But she said that she knows what she saw that day, and she knows what will be waiting for her on the other side when her time comes. An old friend. So let me know what you think about that. What do you think she saw? I came back to making content. I decided that what I was going to do is weekdays were going to be content creation and weekends were going to be time off with my family. But when I decided to do that, I was like, I'll double up on Mondays and Tuesdays just to make up for those 2 days that I didn't do a story. So I hope that everyone enjoyed that. Let me know your thoughts because I'm interested to hear. I worked in a veterinary. I hate saying that word. I can't say it. But I worked in a clinic for a long time. And I was reading this email and I was like, I know exactly what she's talking about. I never saw anything like that. I didn't, I'm just not that interesting. But I have the feeling, yeah. And it does. Loss does become something that you just sit with because you see it daily, in and out, all the time. And I'm sure that nurses as well, nurses, doctors, anybody in medical profession sees this too. So not that, but like the constant like loss. So I know it took me a really long time to kind of like regroup my mind and like realize like it's okay to grieve. So if you're someone who's going through something like that, like this your permission slip, it's okay to be sad. Tucker, tell everybody to have a good day. Okay. I'm almost certain that everyone in the paranormal community has one subject that does freak them out, and for me it is doppelgangers, which is why I don't talk about them much. And I've seen people's doppelgangers that I know, but there's always something about them that's off, or like they're not in the same room, you know what I mean, or in the same house. The doppelgangers that freak me out are the ones where like I saw my mom upstairs and then I looked down the stairs and I saw her there too. What? No. I got an email from someone that told me that their family has been plagued by doppelgangers their entire life. Not tell me if they wanted to be anonymous or not, so if people don't tell me, I just always keep their anonymity. So we're just gonna call this person Jake. In Jake's email, he wrote that his family has been plagued by doppelgangers like their entire lives, or at least his entire life. He remembers the first encounter that he had specifically with a doppelganger was he was at his aunt's apartment, and where the apartment was, they had access to the roof where you could go up and you could dry laundry. And he looked up on the roof and he saw his aunt up there hanging laundry out to dry. And he's like, oh, okay, she's up there, no problem. Now, his aunt lived on the first floor, so he's like, I'm just gonna go into her apartment. So he goes in, he walks into her apartment, and she's standing in the kitchen. And he was like, weren't you just like up on the roof hanging laundry? And she was like, no, I've been here the entire time. He told me he's not the only person in his family who has seen doppelgangers of other family members. This is like a constant throughout. So aunts, cousins, moms, dads, everybody has seen doppelgangers of a different family member. Jake told me that the consistent thing with these doppelgangers that all of the different family members see is that they never actually acknowledge you. Like, you can wave to them, you can talk to them, you can say something to them, but they never actually react or really even look at you. Definitely no talking. I truly can't imagine. My lips are so dry. This winter, I can't take much more, you guys. I can't take much more. I'm so dry. I'm one flaky ass bitch right now. Now, aside from the logical explanation being that Jake's family is just full of like para-Olympic athletes who are faster than the speed of light and being able to move that quickly from one space to another without even knowing that they're doing it, they don't have an explanation. Jake said this is just something that they lived with and that he lived with, and it was like, whatever, it is what it is, until he had one encounter and it really started to freak him out. He wrote in his email that during CVID, he and his family actually moved to a farm and they had goats. Love goats, love that for you. One of his daily chores on the farm was to take care of the goats with his cousin, who he said that we could call Tyne. The goats are outside, they're making goat noises, and that means, okay, like Tyne like must be out there feeding them, so it's time for us to go and take care of the goats. So he looks out the window. He sees his cousin out there feeding the goats, taking care of the goats. And he's like, all right, I better get my shit together because I gotta get out there and help, otherwise like it's not gonna be pretty. So he goes to the front door. He's putting his boots on. Next thing he knows, he says the door bursts open. His cousin comes running in the house and runs past him, actually brushes along his legs and just takes off super fast upstairs. Watches his cousin run up the stairs, okay? Then he hears somebody in the bathroom, which is right across from him. Door opens. It's his cousin, Tyne. He looks up the stairs, that cousin, gone. Jake told me in his email, he was like, listen, a lot of other times it's like, okay, you were at a distance. I saw you far away. He said, but no, this time he actually physically touched this double that ran past him while he was putting his boots on at the front door, looked across the hall, saw his actual cousin walk out of the bathroom, looked up the stairs that this other cousin had run up and gone, nothing, vanished into thin air. Jake said that that was the one encounter where he was like, no, you touched me. Which, yeah, ew, you touched me. Like, it touched him, you guys. After that encounter, Jake was like, yeah, there's no logical explanation. Like, even if we were Paralympic athletes who were faster than the speed of light, there's no way. It just couldn't happen. Apparently, this is just something that Jake and his family deal with on a consistent basis. They just have doppelgangers of all of them that just pop in and out and freak the other family members out. Like I said, when it comes to the paranormal, there's a lot of things that I just eye roll at, like a ghost shutting a door at my parents' house. I'm annoyed. But that? No. I could not. I don't know, but as I was reading more and more about doppelgangers, it just seems to me like this family just has spiritual doubles that truly do just run amok. I don't know. Let me know what y'all think about that. How do you feel about doppelgangers? I don't like them. Do you guys have like one thing that you're like, I don't like that? For me, it's doppelgangers. What's yours?
So as you guys know, you know that my mom was a strict mom. She didn't play all that sneaking out of house crap. She didn't play all that stealing her car crap and going out. And so I knew that if I ever did anything like that, she was going to be on me like bad. So tell me why I waited until I got away from the house to do something stupid. Yeah. So my mom didn't allow me to go to everybody's house, but she trusted this woman and this woman's husband. The husband was at work and the mom was at home. Me and their daughter were the same age. We were both 14 at the time. And the mom Since the dad was at work, the mom was just like, off in her room doing her own thing, and we were in the living room. Now, we were sitting there, talking, doing what teenagers do, and all of a sudden she's like, "You want to go to a party?" I was like, "No." And so she's like, you can go ahead and call and ask your mama, because my mama said that I can go. Now, mind you, I find it hard to believe that her mama said that she can go, right? But I ended up calling my mom, and I was just like, "Mom, such and such wanted to know if I can go to a party." My mama like loudly said no. And so went ahead and hung the phone up. That was it. I'm not questioning my mom. My mom said no. So I told the girl, I'm like, "No, my mama said no." She was like, "Well, we gonna go anyway. Your mom is not gonna find out about it." And da-da-da-da. She said all this stuff like, whose mom is not gonna find out about it? Who? So fast forward, I wasn't worried at first, because I'm like, well, her mom is here. Her mom is not going to let nothing happen. She is not about to allow us to waltz up out this house and go to a party. Your mom is literally in a room. So fast forward after that, her mom comes out the room and she's like, "Hey, I'm about to go somewhere real quick." She said, "Lock this door. I'll be right back. I won't be long." Okay. We sitting down in the living room. Next thing you know, as soon as her daughter hears the car pull off, here this heifer go into the kitchen and grabs the keys. They had multiple cars. Now, mind you, this is my first and last experience with peer pressure, because after this, I promised myself I wouldn't be peer pressured again. But my dumb self got in the car with her, and I'm in the passenger seat and she's in the driver's seat. Mind you, neither one of us have taken driver's ed. Okay, and I'm just thinking to myself, I said, my mama gonna beat me to the white meat when she find out about this. Now, because we haven't taken driver's ed, we don't know what to do. Like, we have no clue. All we know is to put the key in the ignition. And so she's like having a little bit of a time doing that. So while she's doing that, I feel somebody is looking at me. And so the house to the right, they lived in a cul-de-sac. The house to the right, it had a for sale sign on the lawn. And she had already told me that the people who used to live there moved out of state. So it's empty. But if it's empty, why is there an old woman staring at me, right? She was older. And while she's standing there, she just kind of looked like she's staring, like she judging us pretty much. Like, look at these dummies. So then fast forward, while I'm looking at this woman and she's looking at me, the girl finally got the car to start. She turned the key into the ignition and the car started. The older woman calmly walked from the porch on over to the car. Like, there was no rush in her. She calmly walked over to the car and put her hand on the hood of the car, and the car turned off. Now, I can see this woman, but obviously the girl cannot see this woman. And I look and I'm like, okay. So I unhook my seatbelt. We both do, because it's not turning over. Like, the car is not starting again. And so the girl was just like, "Come on." So we jump out the car. She throws the keys back in the kitchen on the hook. And literally as soon as we got back in that house, her mom pulled up. Now, after that, I did ask the girl, like, "I thought you said that the people who live next door moved." And she was like, "They did move." And so I was like, "Okay, well, there was a woman over there." She was like, "Oh, well, I don't know anything about that." She was like, "But they did move. And, I don't think anybody lives there." Fast forward, it's time for me to go home. And I ended up telling my mom what I did. I felt guilty. So I told my mom what I did. And she was like, "Oh, yeah, I know." She said, "I could clear as day see you doing what you were doing." She was like, "And I could see the woman who made sure it didn't happen." Fast forward, I never hung out with that girl again, because I felt like I wasn't myself around her. And I was like, I don't want to be around nobody who I'm going to become a completely different person around. Right. So I stopped like calling her and everything. So I asked my mom how she knew, and she told me. She was like, "I pray over y'all every single night, every single day." She said, my biggest prayer is always, if I'm not there, that God, sends his absolute best to look after y'all, to make sure that y'all okay. And so I think what people fail to realize is it's not always our family members' spirits who are looking over us. There are spirits you've never come across, spirits that don't know you, who, God gave them that assignment.
Have you guys heard about the story about the man that found out his daughter was actually his half-sister? Yeah, So this whole situation happened to a young pastor in America. He had a long-term girlfriend that eventually turned into his wife. Young love, met in college, got married, have two beautiful daughters. His wife had some daddy issues of her own. Didn't have a relationship with her dad, had quite a turbulent upbringing with him. And when she was introduced to her father-in-law, he was like, I'm your new dad. And they hit it off really, really well. And her husband was just so happy that her father-in-law, his dad, really took her under his wing, was always there for her, took her out on little shopping dates, would message her, just had this really great relationship, you know. It turns out their relationship was a little bit too close, you know, not the daddy-daughter relationship that everyone thought it was. The guy said there was really no suspicions that anything was going on other than her phone would constantly be going off. And when he'd see that it was a phone call from his dad, a text message from his dad, he never thought anything of it. Like, why would you ever think that your dad was after your wife? They also lived really far away from each other across several states, and there was never any suspicion that they were meeting up and doing anything because they lived so far away. His dad did, however, come over once every couple of months to help out with the kids, help out with some building work. Again, no suspicions. Your dad helps you out with your family, right? When this guy got his dream position in a church, they moved closer to his hometown, which means that he was closer to his parents. And this is when suspicions started to ramp up, but still, maybe they were in denial that anything was happening. On one particular day, his wife was somewhere around the house and he noticed on her iPad that she was receiving Snapchats quite a lot, quite consecutive, all in one go. And he looked at it out of curiosity and noticed that the Snapchat name was of his dad. Now, his dad's a grown-ass man. Why is he on Snapchat and why is he Snapchatting his wife? So he clicked to open the picture and it was a inappropriate image of his dad's member. When he went upstairs to go see his wife, she kind of already knew that he'd seen the Snapchat because he looked at it on the iPad. She obviously had it on her device and saw that the image had been opened. And I guess she played Little Miss All Innocent because he, to this day, doesn't really have a bad word to say about his wife. He immediately went into defensive mode, called up his dad, called up his mum, said, don't speak to me and my family again. You've betrayed all trust. My wife is very vulnerable. What you've done is really bad, and completely cut off ties with them. However, that break didn't last very long at all. And within a couple of months, within 6 months, they were back to having family night Friday dinner. His mum had stayed with his dad. He'd stayed with his wife. Of course, they have two beautiful girls together, and they decided they want to extend their family and try and have another baby. During these family times, like Christmas and dinner, the wife and his dad would kind of steer clear of each other, but eventually they kind of got a bit closer and I guess pretended like nothing had happened. There must be a lot of trust in this family because everybody allowed them to still talk to each other. And they said at one particular time they'd stayed up quite late at night speaking to each other, just going through their tragedies. What? This family is too trusting. Anyway, a few months later, the wife ends up getting pregnant. She gives birth to another beautiful baby girl. The husband's a little bit suspicious, though, because his two other daughters are blonde hair, blue eyes. This one is brown hair and brown eyes, similar to one of his own siblings. And he's just got this seed of doubt. And he doesn't want to say anything to his wife. He confides into his mum, and I guess the family's trusting. They said that affair's over and done with. Bear in mind, this affair lasted 4 years before they were caught originally. 4 years. Secretly, the husband did a paternity test. And I already told you the little secret here. It was his half-sister. His wife had given birth to his half-sister. His father had child with his wife. I guess his world came crumbling down. Again, he blamed his dad. His wife is vulnerable. He took advantage of her. They completely cut off ties. He decided to raise his half-sister as his own child. Like I said, trust is big in this family. It only really took about a year of no contact until they started having family dinners again. And to this day, he and his dad are building a relationship together. His mum is still with his dad. Trust is big in this family. Shows you what forgiveness can look like. But I don't know about you, But this man, he must have the patience of a saint, and he must absolutely adore his wife and adore his family unit. But I don't know about you, but I ain't ever trusting my wife and my dad to be alone again. If that was me, they ain't giving it up. They ain't giving it up. What do you think about the story? You can listen to the full episode on other people's lives. I think it's named like My Father Had a Child with My Wife. It's very long. It's very non-linear. If you want the whole story while you're cleaning your house or cooking your dinner, I definitely recommend you watch it. Do you have a weird story of your own? Let me know.
We are back with another Trini Paranormal, Trini Serious Story, Trini Folklore for you today, and guess what? We're back in one of those industries, in one of those plants with a very long paranormal scary story. So our follower said, "Hi, so what that person said about industries being haunted is so real. So I worked in a manufacturing company in Arima, and I didn't believe anything until I started working the night shift. And then I realized that there really are spirits. At night while working, I was standing by a machine, and all around it has doors which has sensors. But these doors are sliding doors that lock, so it's impossible just to slide. At night while I'm alone monitoring it, from the control screen, it just stops. Then I walk around and saw one of the doors open. I look around to see if maybe there was someone messing around, but it's 2 a.m. and no one is there working at that hour. I reset it and continue as normal. Not much after, until another night around minutes to 11, the same thing happens, but to a door in the complete other side. I was beginning to feel paranoid, so I mentioned the experience to a technician, and he told me something like that also happens to him a while ago, and he also feels like something is roaming the plant. Fast forward to about 2 weeks ago, so this is very recent. Fast forward to about 2 weeks ago, this was just before lunchtime, so about 11 a.m. Me and a co-worker was doing an inspection on a big roller, and after we stood there and was talking, we both got silent while we was filling out a form, and no joke, we both heard like a whisper calling my name. We both freaked out and turned to see if maybe there was someone around, but we both in the hallway, and no one on both ends that we can see was there. We started to question it. It was absolutely creepy, and to this day, we have absolutely no idea what the hell called my name. I was never a person to believe in these things, but it's real." This person also goes on to say, "Sometimes while you are making rounds before 6 a.m., so like between 3 and 4 a.m., while walking on this floor, I would swear that I saw a shadow in the corner of my eye." Again, I wasn't much of a believer, but I believe these things now. You see night shift on an industry plant? I think night shift on the whole is extremely creepy, but a lot of these paranormal stories that we are getting from those plants and industries are generally happening between 12 and 3 to 4 a.m. So let me know, do you work in a plant? Have you worked in a plant and experienced something paranormal? Let me know.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys a story time of this boy that I was dating, and he had an ancestral calling, and one day he decided to do a reading on me, and he started to beat me up. So me and this guy had been together for like a couple of months, right? And I remember he used to tell me that he has a spiritual gift, but he has spiritual gifts from both his mom's side of the family and his dad's side of the family. Do you understand? So his mom's side of the family gave him the spiritual gift of the prophet. You know, those people that wear white, I think, and yellow. I'm not sure what they wear, but those ones that see without the bones. And they also use water, right, to heal people, if I'm not mistaken. And then his dad's side of the family wants him to go to initiation school to be a traditional healer. And so he is able to see without the bones, so he didn't really understand that side. And what was crazy is this boy refused to go and be a traditional healer. Like, he refused the both of them. So I was just like, what are you gonna do with it? He was just like, I don't know, but like, I'm genuinely not interested in these things, so I'm not doing either of them, right? But then he was like, I literally can give you a reading while you're sitting. Well, understand, like, while we're sitting like this, I can do that. And I'm like, so does it happen that you see people's things? And he was like, sometimes when he walks past somebody and they're walking with something that's bigger than them, that's just bigger than the system, bigger than the problem, he can see it. And I'm like, he's like, some of these taxi drivers like have like animals and things inside their taxi drivers, and I'm inside their taxi, sorry. And he told me that he can see those animals as a spirit. And I was like, my guy. And he was like, yeah, he can spot somebody who is a ritualist, he can spot a witch doctor, he can spot somebody that deals with witchcraft. Like, all of these things are so easy for him, but he refuses to accept the gift. And apparently his mom was deceased, right? So his mom was able to fight for him so that he doesn't go to be a traditional healer, sorry. So his mom was basically fighting for him, right? And spiritually, of course, because his dad's side of the family wanted this, and the mom was like, no. Even in death, that girl was like, not with my child. And I said, cluck and queen. So this one time, me and this boy, right, are sitting at his Aussie, right, at his place, and it's just the two of us. So I tell him one day, and I said, I want you to do a reading on me, Baba. So he's like, no. And I'm like, I want you to do a reading on me, you know? And I was like, how do you do a reading on somebody? And he was like, when I do a reading on you, sometimes you have to tell me your name, surname, give me your date of birth, and that's all I need. And I was like, okay. Gave him my name, gave him my surname, gave him my date of birth. He refused to do it, and I started like giving him my ID number. It was funny when I was doing it, ne? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna say my ID number, and then you're gonna see something, right? I start saying my ID number, and he's like, okay, fine, let me do it. How, guys? He tells me we should sit on the floor, right? We sit on the floor. Sit on the floor. He holds my hands, and he's like, okay, give me your name, your surname, your date of birth. I do all of those things, and then I don't know, like, I felt a shift of energy because there was a wave of wind inside. And I'm looking at this boy like, are you okay? And then he has his eyes closed. He starts going into a trance, guys. Yeah. And this boy is literally now speaking in a different voice. And he's like, why did you summon me? I'm like, what? I didn't summon anybody. And this person is like, why did you summon me? I said, girl, what is going on? You know, so I tried to like shake him, and he's like, why did you summon me? And then I shake him again, like, hey guy, like, what's going on? When I tell you this, he went like this. So I'm like, huh? Guys, he pulled me like this and then like dragged me forward to him, and then he started slapping me, but not on my face. He was slapping my hands, like boom, boom, and then he pushed me. How? I'm thinking, Hyper, what is this? Yo, guys, I didn't know what to do about. So I'm running around the house. This person is chasing me. So I finally get to the room, and I try to close the door, and I'm screaming. So as I try to close the door, this person like, open for me. Why did you summon me? Why did you summon me? Hey. And then he eventually like opens the door, and I was just like, you know what? I am about to die. It's okay, guys. It's okay. I close my eyes, and I look down, and I hear his grandmother come in, and the grandmother was praying, guys. And the grandmother came with a bucket of water, and then she splashed the boy, and then he stopped. Guys, this person was going to kill me. I promise you he was going to kill me, because he was walking towards me and just walking towards me to just, that was honestly traumatizing. I was scared. I was sweating. So now I look at the grandma, I look at this boy, and she literally splashed water on him, and he stopped. He went on the ground, and he started breathing. And then the grandmother's like, oh, I didn't give this. Okay, he's like, the boy, you're gonna call him the boy. He's like, the boy, like, you started your things again. What's wrong with you? And I'm like, so the grandma was like, you really need to start going to church, because you see, you could have harmed this child, you know, you could have harmed somebody's child. Why did you do that? And he's just quiet. He gets up and he goes outside, leaves me there with his grandmother, right? His grandmother asks me if I'm okay. I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. I take my stuff and I'm ready to leave. As I'm getting ready to leave, he tries to stop me, and I'm thinking, are you trying to manhandle me again? No, I want to leave. So as I'm walking out, like, he looks at me, and I don't say anything to the grandma, because what can I possibly say? She was wiping the water. So his grandmother, I knew his grandmother. His grandma did not have a problem. So she had left, I don't know to do what, and luckily she came just in time to save me. Leaves the house, I leave the house, whatever, and then he texts me and he tries to speak to me, and I'm just like, bro, like, what was that? And he's like, part of this is actually your fault. I'm like, how? He's like, you were not supposed to make me do that, blah blah blah. And he's like, his grandmother literally tells him all the time to go to church, and he refuses because he doesn't want any of these gifts. And I'm just like, bruh, like, just go to church, hear what they have to say. If they tell you about being a traditional healer, then okay, maybe you can put your guns down, but you need to do something. You need to at least pray. You need to at least do something. You understand? Chilled. He's like, if you forgive me and go to church with me, I'll go if you agree to come with me. And I said, okay, cool. I forgave him after he manhandled me. I forgave him, shame, and we went to church and they started praying for him. And you know what's nice is that the dad's no, not the dad, man. The people there started praying for him, and there are people that are prophesying over his life. It's not a Christian church. It's a church which believes in God and ancestors. Please don't get it confused. So there were people that are prophesying over his life, telling him that he needs to become a prophet. That is the gift that his mom gave him. But the side of him being a traditional healer is not a real thing because of the dad wants to use him for his things. So if he agrees to be a traditional healer, his dad is going to control him and his gift. And he's going to make you do evil things, all in the name of being a traditional healer. And what's funny is that these people know exactly the traditional healer that they're going to take you to so that they can play with you. You're lucky that you have your mom. And I was like, oh man, that's so sweet. And yeah, the minute he started the process of being a prophet is when me and him, we split. I cut ties with him because what? You think I forgot what you did? No. I'm just playing your, like, the communication was not there anymore, and also, he was at a church where he had to be there, I think, for like 6 weeks or something, and we didn't really speak like that because he used to tell me that they're still trading him and all of that, only to find out that he had found himself a girlfriend there, and they were bonding and they were vibing, prophet via prophet, and because I can't see anything, I'm a stupid. It's okay.
Let's read another scary story that was sent to us. My parents are divorced, and I ended up moving home to my dad's house. I have a little brother who is years younger than me, so he was very small when I moved in. My room was next to my brother's room, and across the hallway was my dad's room. In the beginning, there wasn't much happening. I started getting sleep paralysis, which I had never had beforehand. It started out small. I would wake up and couldn't move, and my door would be open, which was weird since I had always slept with it closed. I brushed it off since I thought it might have just been a coincidence. Time went on and the sleep paralysis got worse. I started seeing things. I read up on sleep paralysis and came to the conclusion that it was normal to see things, though I couldn't really get over what I was seeing. But I also couldn't remember everything in detail about what I saw, and that terrified me. I would wake up, not able to move, when the door would slowly creak open. I'm laying on my back and I try to look towards the door, but I can't. So I'm just trying to see it out of the corner of my eye, when a small, dark-haired girl crawls up to my bed and just sits in this weird crouched position while tilting her head and smiling. I had never in my life felt so unsafe and unsettled. Her eyes were gone, just sockets of darkness, and it was like I could feel her malicious intent. A year went by with this almost nightly, and every morning I would wake up to my door open. My little brother was getting bigger and finally started to walk and talk. I would spend a lot of time babysitting him, especially at night, since my dad worked the night shift. One night, I was babysitting him. I walked to the living room because I heard him giggling and talking to someone. When I walked in, he immediately turned towards me, and his happy face fell, and instead he looked scared. I was a little weirded out since he's never been scared of me. Even when he is in trouble, he isn't scared of me. So I sat down and asked him what he was doing and who he was talking to. He looked behind me 3 or 4 times before answering, "She doesn't like you." I'm pretty freaked out and ask, "Who doesn't like me?" He looked behind me again before placing his little hand on my mouth and shushing me. Later that night, I woke up out of nowhere to see my door wide open and the red sensor light illuminating a small child in the hallway. I freaked out at first. The sight was pretty terrifying, until I realized it was my brother. I went to him to ask him why he was up and what he was doing. He didn't answer at first, just pointed behind me. I have never been so scared as I swung around to see what he was pointing at, only to find nothing. I asked him what he meant, as there was nothing there. He got a bit angry with me because I didn't believe him. I went to put him back to bed, and I pressed him for a bit more information. He told me that the dark-haired girl won't let him sleep. She keeps wanting to play. When he mentioned the dark-haired part, a shiver ran down my spine, and I felt true fear. I didn't want to scare him, so I just told him to go to sleep and tell her that he isn't old enough to play at night. This made him smile. The last part was a small running joke we had, because he didn't understand that I was old enough to go to parties when he was sleeping. This started to happen often. He would stand in the hallway or be talking to someone. My dad mostly brushed it off to him having a big imagination, until one night I had sleep paralysis and woke up to deep scratch marks going down my legs. Like you could see where the marks started and ended. That's when I finally had enough and asked my dad for help. He didn't really believe any of this, but he did have a friend who was a medium. She came by and she recorded the conversation we had in my room and my brother's to see if we would catch anything. We were actually able to catch a girl's voice saying hello, and it definitely wasn't my voice or hers. Way too high-pitched, way too perfect. It was almost clearer than our voices on the recording. I moved the hell out of there as fast as I could, though it didn't help, to be honest. I moved into a house in the forest. There was at least 2 to 3 kilometers to the nearest neighbor. You had to go by my house no matter what if you wanted to go into the forest. I would hear footsteps walking the hallways. I would hear hushed voices from rooms I wasn't in. Even my dog didn't like the forest, which I didn't know or understand until one night. My dog ran away, and I thought that with all the wildlife, he would head into the forest, so I went to look for him. We have no real predators in my country. The biggest threat are foxes. I walked and called for him for about 30 minutes when I saw eyes reflecting back at me from the bushes. I was relieved thinking it was my dog, but as I got closer, it stood up. It stood up and it was taller than me even from meters away, and suddenly I heard whistling behind me. A slow, deliberate whistling, which froze me on the spot. I was the only person in this forest, and I knew that no one had come by my house for hours, and people weren't even allowed in the forest after sunset anyway. I ran and didn't look behind me until I reached my house, but there were no lights on in my house, and I knew that I had left them on when I went looking for my dog, since it makes it easier to find the way home when it's extremely dark. My dog didn't even go into the forest. He instead headed into town, which was kilometers away. I never even walked that route with him. I always take him into the forest, so I don't get why he would walk into town. Then I moved again because fuck no, I'm not staying at some haunted forest. That's when I realized that moving won't help. I moved into my current apartment and things just keep happening. I have security cameras since my dog has separation anxiety and doesn't like being alone. It started with the dog this time. I was at work watching the live security when he suddenly got up and started dancing and jumping towards the door as if I was walking in greeting him. Then he suddenly walks towards the bed and starts growling. Not the I don't like that growl, the most aggressive and angry growl I have ever heard from him. Other times, I just see a human-sized shadow following him around the apartment. I can't find my things sometimes, and then they turn up in the weirdest places. I found a sentimental small vase stuffed inside one of my shoes. I honestly have no idea how that is possible since those two things have never been near each other. The most uncomfortable thing I experienced while living in this current place was when I was in the shower and I suddenly heard and felt heavy footsteps. The kind that I could feel vibrate the floor and hear as if it was just outside the shower curtain. I ripped the shower curtain away to see if anyone was there. I brushed it off until it happened again about 30 seconds later. The steps were so heavy that I couldn't brush it off. It really felt as if a really big man was walking around, but I only heard those 2 steps. Okay, that is terrifying, and I don't know if this person is like haunted, like if something is like attached to them and following them around, or maybe this person is just really sensitive to the spiritual world. Anyway, that is really creepy, and if you're from Denmark, leave a comment if you've ever had anything spooky happen to you.
From Kentucky South, there's this myth and this legend of this creature called the mulberry black thing, and people just describe it as a shapeshifter, and it takes all kinds of forms, but there's no real description of it, which is odd because normally if I look into a cryptid, I can find all kinds of information. But this one is just, there's a ton of different stories about people saying, oh, I saw the mulberry black thing, but not really any description of what it actually is or where it came from. So if you're from this area, you're familiar with this, I would love to hear your thoughts. This is the first I've actually ever heard about this, but this story came from someone named Lay, and she says that her dad growing up would always tell her and her siblings like creepy stories, like ghost stories. He was known for wanting to scare the children, but at the end of every story, he would always say, oh, the story's made up, except for when it came to this one, he said, this actually happened. Ghosts and devils don't scare me, but this thing does. His dad grew up in Mulberry, Florida, which is a small town in South Florida, and he grew up in the 1950s doing what people in the 1950s did, and his own grandfather, who's known as Grandpa Brown in Lay's family, known throughout the area as a hard man who wasn't afraid of anything. He poached gators, he caught cottonmouths barehanded. He had been in enough bar fights around town that people knew not to mess with him. But even when her dad was a kid, Grandpa Brown drove this old, ancient, beat-up pickup truck that her dad described as being held together by wire and chewing gum. And Grandpa Brown would drive to the bar and hang out before driving home this long, winding dirt road. Went through a wooded area, over a dip, over some railroad tracks, and then up a hill to where he actually lived. One night, Grandpa Brown stays out at the bar later than usual, and he had a few more drinks than usual, but he still wanted to go home. And even though it wasn't smart, he was going to drive, and he got in his truck and he started the long road home. He goes through the woods and down to the dip when his engine stalls, and he's not thinking anything of it because it's an old truck. He gets out in the pitch black of night and he's checking the engine, and what spooked him was this lumbering creature that comes out of the woods. And at first he thought it was an animal, maybe standing on two legs, but as it got closer, he noticed it had no head. Thing above this thing's shoulders, and so he pushes the truck apparently across the railroad tracks, and as he did, the headlights came on. He hopped in and hightailed it home. Dad would laugh when he described Grandpa Brown jumping in his truck and driving home in the dead of night, but when Grandpa Brown was asked about this, he would go solemn, and from that point on, he never stayed anywhere out past dark, and if he did, he slept there. He says, I need to reiterate that this man was afraid of nothing except for whatever he saw that night. Said that what she has found out about it is that sometimes it shows as a black bear with glowing red eyes or a headless man, but people who have encountered this mulberry black thing all report having their engines stalled. Sometimes this thing, whatever it is, has been reported to have jumped on top of the cars and bang on the roofs. Said she was sharing this with the hope that somebody else out there knows more about this creature, so if you have any thoughts, please weigh in, and if you have a story that you think nobody would believe, something that seems creepy or just too out there, send it in. We'd love to hear it.
What would happen if you followed a mimic? Now, I've always wondered this, because you hear these stories of someone hearing like their mother knocking at the door or telling them to come in the kitchen. But what would happen if you actually listened to the mimic? Here's a story that might tell you why you should not follow a mimic. There was this young man named Aiden. Now, Aiden lived with his grandfather and his two parents. Now, one day, Aiden was hanging out in his bedroom, and he's playing a game. Well, he hears his parents, pull in, and he looks out the window and sees them getting out of the car, unloading some groceries into the house. So he's like, awesome, man, we're going to have something to eat. So he goes back to his game, and then he hears his mother say, Aiden, come in the kitchen, I got some food. And he, at this time was in the middle of a battle. So he's like, hold on, Mom, I'll be there shortly. I'm in the middle of a battle. And she goes, come on, Aiden, hurry up, come in the kitchen. And all of a sudden, he said he got a phone call, and it was from his mom. And he's like, why is she calling me when she's in the kitchen? So he picks it up, and his mom's like, hey, honey, we're at the grocery store. Do you want us to get you anything? And he goes, what do you mean you're at the grocery store? You already got groceries. You're in the kitchen. And she goes, what are you talking about? We just got to the grocery store. And he looks out the window and sees that their car is not there. And then right at this moment, he hears his mom saying, you better get in the kitchen right now or you're going to be in trouble. You better come eat. And he's like, I got to call you back, Mom. He hangs up. So he goes and he locks his door, and then he calls his mom right back and is like, look, when you get home, call me. I'll help you bring in the groceries. So about 25, 30 minutes later, his mom calls him. And she's like, honey, we're home. Come outside. And he said he was getting ready to go out of his room, but he looked out his window first, and their car wasn't there. So he's like, you know what? I don't know what to do because I don't know, who really is my mom right now. So as he's sitting in his bedroom, he hears his parents come home and come into the house. And all of a sudden, his mom comes up to his door and starts knocking. And she goes, Aiden, let me in. And he's like, not right now, Mom. And she goes, what are you talking about? Let me in. Unlock this door. Why do you have the door locked? And he's like, no, I'm not opening the door. And his mom goes, all right, I'll just get the key and unlock it. So he grabs like this baseball bat that's chilling in his room, and he's prepared for this thing to come in. And like at the time, he still thinks whatever, was calling his name in the kitchen, this is them. So he sees the handle jiggle and the door open, and it's really his mom. And he can tell that it is actually his real mom. And she goes, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, nothing. And he sets the bat down. And she's like, you're acting weird and stuff. And there's food in the fridge if you're hungry. So he didn't know what to make of that. Like, what did he just experience? And he didn't feel like he could tell his parents about it. So he decided to talk to his grandpa, who was kind of like his best friend at the time. So he goes to his grandpa's room, and he's like, Grandpa, he's like, have you ever seen something like you can't explain? And he goes, what do you mean? And he tells the story about like how he thought his mom and dad had came home, he's seen their car and everything, but it wasn't actually them. And the grandpa goes, oh no. And he goes, what's wrong, Grandpa? And he says, well, when I was a young boy, I grew up in a small Polish village near Warsaw. And he said, we had this term that was this long Polish word, but it roughly translated into evil twin. And he said they believed there were these evil spirits that could take the form of anyone and would try and trick you and lure you, out into the woods. So his grandpa said, when I was a young boy, my father had me chopping wood outside. And I hear my grandma's voice coming from the forest. And she's saying, come in the woods. I baked you a pie. Like, come out here. It's nice and warm. Like, you'll like this pie. And he said, he was so hungry, like he almost started to go out into the woods until his father ran and grabbed him and said, get back in the house. And his father locked the door and said, if you hear someone calling you from the woods, don't ever go, don't respond. So he said, when you encounter an evil twin, as they called it, they will follow you for the rest of your life. And he feared that maybe this thing had followed him here to America, and this is what Aiden had seen. A couple weeks later, his parents are gone, and it's just him and his grandpa, and they're watching this World War II documentary in the living room. Well, all of a sudden, the wind picked up, and a strong breeze pushes the back kitchen door open, and they hear it, open up. So his grandpa's like, I'll go and close the door real quick, and I better lock it so it doesn't blow open again. So his grandpa goes into the kitchen, but after about 10-15 minutes, he doesn't come back. So Aiden's like, Grandpa, are you all right? He goes into the kitchen, the back door's still open, and he doesn't see his grandpa. He goes throughout the house, he's yelling his name, he doesn't see him anywhere. So he goes out, to the back door, and he's yelling his grandpa's name, he doesn't hear it. So he calls up his parents, and his parents come home immediately, and they call the police, and they do this big search throughout the neighborhood and into the woods. And they end up finding his grandfather in the middle of the woods. He is completely naked. He is confused and doesn't know who he is, doesn't know anything, doesn't remember anything. So they bring him back home and everything. Well, Aiden said that, they chalked this up to dementia and said he was diagnosed with a severe case of dementia. But Aiden, in his mind, suspected, because of the series of events that happened before this and his grandfather going out to the kitchen when the door opened, that this was the evil twin thing that his grandfather had talked about. And he said, although his grandfather had completely lost his memory, from time to time, he would say to Aiden, is my brother outside? Is my brother out there? And he couldn't figure out why, his grandfather would keep saying that. And then he realized maybe this thing appeared as his brother, and it lured him into the woods.
Y'all, trigger warning, and I am back with another spooky story. We're gonna call the person who submitted the story Carol. So Carol says that she didn't realize her fiance's family hated her until she got pregnant. So Carol met him at work. We're gonna call the fiance Andre. So Carol and Andre met at work. Carol describes Andre to be quiet, gentle, and family-oriented. Andre told Carol that him and his family were close, but she didn't understand what he meant until she met them. And at that point, it might have been too late. So Carol and Andre started dating, and they fell head over heels. Fast forward, it's time to meet the family. So we're gonna call Andre's mother Solange, okay? When Carol met Solange, she was smiling at her and everything, but the mother's energy was saying something completely different. Then she met his sister. We're gonna call her Maribel. Maribel literally asked her one question. So you're the new girl? and then just walked away. I mean, after that first meeting, things were weird, but Carol's under the impression that things are gonna get better. She kept dating Andre. Eventually, he proposed to her, and his mother cried, like boo-hoo cried, and it wasn't happy tears. She was pissed, but they went through their engagement, and then Carol found out that she is pregnant. And when she got pregnant, things shifted. Things got dark. At this point, Carol and her man are living together, and his mother insisted on coming over and cooking for Carol. And every visit, keep this in mind, the mother would touch Carol's stomach, whisper prayers in a language that she didn't recognize, and the sister always asked weird, intrusive questions. She would ask questions about her womb, like, are you sure it's stable enough to carry a child? Questions about whether or not women in her family carry babies well. Then out of nowhere, her body started rejecting the pregnancy. Started off with nightmares, horrifying nightmares that felt real, bleeding, cramping after family dinners, and every time she would go to the doctors would tell her that everything looked normal. But according to Carol, nothing about that pregnancy felt normal. Well, everything would come to a head. One day, Andre and Carol were at Andre's mother's house. Carol stepped away to go to the bathroom when she overheard Maribel, Andre's sister, on the phone, talking about she's still pregnant. Mama said the work should have slowed it down by now. And amongst other things, that seriously worried Carol. That night, Carol went home and searched her apartment. Well, behind the stove, under her bed, inside her plants, let's just say that she found things that did not belong to her. She woke up Andre and confronted him. Andre's destroyed, and the very next day, Carol woke up. Unfortunately, she lost the baby. Carol says that she's Ugandan, and what Andre's family didn't know was that her grandmother raised her and taught her how to defend herself spiritually. Well, that she did. Carol went back to Uganda, got a bit of clarity, and then she was ready to strike. Y'all, this story is so long, filled with so much gruesome details that I can't tell on this platform. But I did tell the full story. I just uploaded it on my YouTube page. In my latest YT video caption, her in-laws ruined her pregnancy and she got revenge. It's a full 27-minute story, so run, don't walk. From your favorite Haitian homegirl.
Weird spooky story time, and is the veil thinning in Hollister, California? I've lived here now for 8 years, and from day one, the activity doesn't know what give it a break means. I have always said this area and this house has other dimensions or timelines trying to merge with ours. I have recordings and a video of some of the stuff that goes on here. I definitely want to see those. I feel that there is a girl stuck here. She is trapped by another ghost, an older one. He died in his 40s-ish and is pissed. I feel she was pregnant and took her life in a shed on this land before it was anything. Her family had a home here long before it was the turkey farm. Her baby is here too. You can hear it running around in the laundry area. We hear tapping, disembodied voices, a man and a woman talking and arguing, footsteps, cold spots, things dropping where nothing has dropped, the creaking floor in the master bedroom where you'd have to physically walk to make it creak, and no one is there. Dark shadows, orbs, dark things flying by hella fast, music, huge crowds of people. The list goes on and on. One night, my husband and I were sitting on the couch. I was facing the eat-in kitchen, which has a huge doorway. There's a fireplace near the door. My husband was sitting on the other end of the couch, facing the laundry area, which is near the fireplace. So we both had a clear view of it. The TV was off, and we were just chit-chatting when I saw a see-through, cloudy apparition walking from the eat-in area in front of the fireplace and then disappeared. It walked maybe 10 feet across. My eyes widened and I said to my husband while pointing, "Look, a ghost, a ghost." He was looking straight ahead at the laundry room and said, "Oh my God, I see it too." Oh my God, I have goosebumps. I don't know if he was fully convinced, LOL. I see apparitions in my house constantly. My daughter, who is also sensitive, often talks about the baby and how she doesn't like staying here because it keeps her up at night. Oh, and about the dimensional stuff. Here's why I think it's a dimension or maybe a timeline that keeps overlapping. My husband, older daughter, and I were sitting on the couch. She was sitting with her back to the laundry room. He was facing the laundry room, and I was facing the eat-in kitchen. The TV was off, and we were just enjoying each other's company, talking and joking. Out of who knows where, I got a vision of an old analog TV sitting in the kitchen between there and the eat-in area. I was sitting on a stand with rabbit ear antennas and the circular one as well. It was on, showing a heavily static, lined picture. The screen was white, the static was black and blue. the white lines, and underneath each line was yellow and red. It was flickering up and down, extremely distorted. I could make out the outline of a woman, her head and part of her shoulders and chest. The sound came in. It started slowly and ramped up. I couldn't understand what she was saying. It was almost like the teacher speaking from the Peanuts, only more robotic and scratchy. Then it ramped back down and disappeared. All three of us sat there stunned. We looked at each other in confusion and disbelief. I called out to our other daughter, who was down the hall in her room. I thought maybe she was right there trying to trick us. She wasn't. She was in her room with the door shut. The three of us could barely speak. Our oldest asked, "What was that?" We were all interrogating each other, trying to see what was real or not. It was in fact real. I have no explanation for what happened. Perhaps you can shed more light on this. There is so much more. I have videos of things flying around in the sky outside my house. That's a real trip too. Also, you're in Hollister, California, which is a hop, jump, and skip from San Juan Bautista. And in San Juan Bautista is one of the missions where there was so much abuse, slavery, horrors that happened to the native people there. And it wouldn't surprise me if where you live there were native people there who were taken from their homes. So I don't know, what do you guys think this is? Has anyone else in Hollister or anywhere experienced anything like this? Let me know in the comments or send me your story.
Let's read a true and scary story. This one's from Caitlin, and it's about her experience with a Ouija board. I used to use the Ouija board all throughout high school. My best friend at the time would play with her mother, which I thought was weird at first, but being a stupid teen, I never questioned it. It started off innocent, just teen girls who were curious by all the normal things. The questions we would ask would be, how many kids will I have, or when will I get married? I remember distinctly asking once, will I have a girl or a boy first? And I remember the board replying by spelling out boy. Fast forward a year from then, COVID lockdown was still active as we were still in 2020. I had just graduated high school and unfortunately had just suffered a miscarriage a few months prior. I went to visit my best friend, who of course asked to play the Ouija board. We started off playing, and I remember telling my friend that I wanted to ask a question in my head. We usually did this for our really personal questions, and the board always responded. She said sure, and I remember thinking the question of am I pregnant? The planchette moved swiftly to yes. I was laughing out loud and remember saying, okay, if I am, then what is it? The Ouija board spelled out girl. I remember telling my friend, that's so weird, didn't it say I would have a boy first? The Ouija board then spelled out letter by letter, you did. The next day, I called my doctor and set up an appointment for a blood test to determine that I was not pregnant. A few days later, I received a call with my results. Positive. 9 months later, I had a healthy baby girl. My husband, who is the father of my daughter and the father of the baby that I lost, forbids playing the Ouija board in our home, and honestly, I do not blame him. This is a very true and real story that very few friends know about, but I thought you'd enjoy. My name is Caitlin, and I haven't touched the Ouija board in years as I am now a mother who has too much to lose, but the story of how I found out I was pregnant with my daughter is not for the faint of heart. This is a very personal and vulnerable story, so I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing. This is so interesting because I really wonder if the ghost was connected to you in some way, shape, or form, because it doesn't seem like it's a malicious spirit at all. I think with Ouija boards too, commonly people will subconsciously move the planchette, but in stories like this, you didn't know you were pregnant, and how would you know that you were pregnant with a girl too? It's absolutely crazy. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for sharing this again. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
When my grandfather passed away, he left me his house. Sounds great, doesn't it? He was old, he had a nice life, and now it was time for me to have one. With all the green I'd get from his house. Easy. But I'd soon learn that it wasn't all fun and games. The house was a small, worn-down place on the edge of a pine forest. The kind that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1950s. I took a few weeks off work to sort it out. Figure out what to keep, what to sell, and what to donate. The attic was the last place that I checked. The hatch was stuck at first. And when I finally forced it open, the smell of dry wood and old insulation poured out. I coughed the dust away, blinked, and took in my a few boxes of yellowed papers, brittle books, and one large trunk against the far wall. When I opened it, I found a folded blanket inside. Not a quilt, just a heavy woolen thing, grey with faint stripes. It was dusty, but intact. There was something familiar about it, though I couldn't place it. That night, I fell asleep with the blanket over me, more out of laziness than comfort. It was scratchy, but had like a strange weight, like it was pressing down on me. But I was exhausted, so I went straight to sleep. At 3 a.m, I woke up freezing. The blanket was gone. I sat up, confused. The window was shut, the doors closed. I found the blanket crumpled in the corner as if someone had thrown it there hard. The next night, the same thing happened. I woke shivering. The blanket was in the corner again, only this time it looked heavier. On the third night, I set up a camera and I fell asleep under the blanket. What I saw the next morning made my stomach drop. Around 2:43 a.m, the blanket twitched. Not with my movements, but on its own. And then it slowly rose, forming a dome over my chest, pulsing once, twice, and then it peeled itself off me and slid neatly into the corner. And beside me, in the bed, there was an impression, as if someone had laid down right next to me. I tried throwing the blanket out. The next morning, it was back in the attic trunk, folded, clean. I finally decided to get professional help in, so I did some Googling and found my woman. I took it to a local historian, Dr. Marin Lyle. I've never... Marin? Marin.
Nice name.
I quite like that name. Marin Lyle.
Marin Lyle.
Yeah, that is a good name.
Short for Marilyn.
Marin?
A specialist in antique textiles. She studied it silently, her face tightening as she pushed the glasses up her nose. This is a mourning cloth, she said. A what? Used in the 19th century, usually. They'd drape it over the deceased before burial. It was a way of protecting them on the journey to the afterlife. A load of codswallop, of course, unless you believe in that sort of thing. Sorry. She blushed and moved on. But this one's a bit different. How? Well, mourning cloths, they're buried with the body. That is literally the whole point in them. So I don't understand why this one's here. I didn't answer. I didn't want to. Marin frowned at the small, hand-sewn X stitches inside the wall. These are binding stitches, she murmured, to keep the spirit from wandering about. They were stitched to keep the spirit and body in situ until they reached the heavenly planes, so that they couldn't be seduced by the evil into hell. The devil, sorry, not evil. I've just realised that evil is in devil.
Yeah, huge, isn't it?
That is huge when
you'll
you
always remember
realise.
the day when you realise that.
I asked her to keep it overnight. She agreed, but hesitantly. That was earlier today. Now I'm in a motel an hour away, door locked, lights on. I didn't even go back to Grandad's house, so I didn't bring anything with me. At least I thought I didn't. 3:42 a.m. I jolt awake, teeth chattering. The heater blasts, but the room feels like a freezer, and that's when I see it. The blanket, folded at the foot of the bed. No, I whisper. You're not here, you can't be. I'm going insane, I know I am. I left the blanket with Marin. This one, well, it was obviously just some bit of rubbish throw quilt that the motel provided. It isn't mine. Hang on, is it me or did that blanket just twitch? My phone vibrates. A call from Marin. I answer with shaking fingers. Marin, what is it? She trembled. It's not here. What? Listen to me carefully. Are you somewhere safe? No, it followed me. Oh, God.
You're not safe at a motel.
Oh, that cloth, it's not normal. I don't believe in ghosts, but honestly, I don't think it's just a piece of fabric. Fabric doesn't move on its own, right? Something has to be controlling it. Before she can say more, the line dissolves into static. I lower the phone. The blanket is no longer folded. It starts to rise. Not float. Rise like a person is standing up underneath it.
Jesus.
One corner lifts first like a shoulder, and then the middle arches, forming a chest. The hem drags on the carpet as the shape grows taller, fuller, a perfect human outline beneath nothing but wall. Marin, I whisper into the phone. It's standing up. The blanket sways on invisible feet as if testing its balance, and then it takes a step. The cloth shifts forward, sagging at the elbows, the head drooping, the body impossibly tall and thin. It's walking towards me. I press against the wall. Inside the blanket, something scratches. Fingers drag along the wall. Then a whisper seeps from within. Jessica, you should have gotten a mortgage instead of waiting for me to die, you inhuman piece of... If you'd have done your accounts and taxes properly, this never would have happened.
Auto glass repair. Auto glass replace.
Financially savvy ghost.
The blanket lunges, the sagging sides swing outward like arms stretching wide. The wall wraps around me with crushing force. There is strength inside. Fingers that aren't physical dig into my shoulders. I fall backward onto the bed. The blanket presses over my face, conforming to it exactly as if a cold body is lying on top of me, chest to chest. A voice exhales against my neck. The only way you will get this house is... The blanket tightens. My vision dims. My legs numb. I thrash, but it only pulls tighter. Just before I black out, I hear a scream. Marin's voice. Not through the phone, but inside the room itself. Don't let it cover your face! I look past the edge of the blanket. She's standing in the doorway, eyes wide, shaking. The blanket inhales sharply. The fabric balloons outward as if a chest inside it expands, and then it seals itself over my face entirely. Everything goes dark. Everything goes cold, and the last thing I hear is a whisper sinking into my ear. Over my dead body.
This story takes place near Joplin, Missouri. There was this man who had lived in this farmhouse for 24 years. And he said, one day it was starting to get late. He was finishing up some work in one of his fields. As he was on the tractor, he said he sees this bright light hovering over the tractor. And he said, it was just this big orb of light. And he said it just sped past him really fast and just took off into the sky. And at the time, he said, just something about it seemed really, really off. So he said later that night, he got the dogs inside and, he was getting ready to go inside for the night. But he said he just remembered, the air was really, really stale. There was just something off. So he goes inside the house and he started cooking some dinner. And he said he remembered there was, this heavy wind whipping against the house. And he said, it must be ready to storm or something because, I can feel the wind, almost rattling and shaking the home. But the odd thing was, when he looked out the window, he said all the trees, the cornfields, everything was just completely still. So he's like, well, where is that sound of the wind coming from? Right at that moment, he hears a bang at the front door, like someone's knocking. So he goes immediately to the front door, and when he opens the door, he said there was a man standing right on the porch. And he described him as looking like, Abraham Lincoln, wearing clothing from the 1800s. He had this big top hat on. And he said he just had this very pale white face. And he said the man didn't move. He just kept his head straight and he was staring at him the whole time. Now, he kept asking him, what do you want? Why are you here? What do you need? The guy would not respond. And he said eventually he was like, all right, you know what? I'm shutting the door. You need to leave. Obviously, you don't want to answer me. So he closed the door and he said when he looked out the window, this guy was gone. So later that night, he's in bed. And he said once again, he could hear the sound of a heavy wind whipping against the house. But when he looked out his bedroom window, the trees were completely still. And all of a sudden, he said he heard his front door open. And at the time, he thought, the wind must have blown the door open. I must have not closed it all the way. So he gets up out of bed. He heads towards the front door. And he said when he got to the front door, it was wide open. And there was no wind outside. So he closed the door. And he said when he turned around, he heard kind of just this weird sound. And he said when he looked up on the ceiling, there was the man that was standing on his porch, hanging from the ceiling by all fours, looking down at him. And he said the next thing he remembered, it was morning time. He was in his bed. And he said for the next couple of days, he just felt really, really ill. And he felt like something was wrong. And all of a sudden, he got better. But he said still to this day, he didn't know what he had encountered.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
Early one morning in January of 1955, 25-year-old Carl Gilbert struggled to stay awake as he drove down a dark highway in rural Kansas. Carl had been driving since about 3 in the morning because he was on his way to an early morning meeting at a college that was over 200 miles away. He didn't want to be late. And so Carl, he took another sip of his coffee and rubbed his face to try and wake himself up, but his eyelids were so heavy and he really was struggling to focus on the road. So Carl was a recruiter, and so it was his job to drive around to different universities in Kansas and Oklahoma to try and recruit graduating seniors for his company. So as a result of that, he was used to waking up in the middle of the night and driving these long distances to get to these colleges. But despite this being sort of typical behavior for him, today he just felt like he was way more tired than normal. And so Carl yawned and drank some more coffee, and he could just feel his eyes getting heavier and heavier. And then at some point, he closed his eyes for what he wanted to be just for a second, but it just felt like he couldn't quite open them again. And as he's sort of blinking for this really long extended blink, he hears a voice in the car. He's all alone in his car. It's the middle of the night. He's by himself, but he hears a voice right behind him actually yell into his ear, "Guy, look out!" Carl, after hearing the voice, jolted upright. He opened his eyes and he realized he hadn't just blinked. He had fallen asleep at the wheel and was now speeding toward a concrete marker on the side of the highway. And so he grabbed the steering wheel and he yanked it just in time so that he only sideswiped the marker instead of a head-on collision, which almost certainly would have killed him. And so Carl, he jammed on the brakes and his car car came to a screeching stop on the side of the road. And there, Carl just, he sat there just taking stock of how close he had just come to dying. His whole body was shaking, like he couldn't believe that had just happened. But eventually, he was able to calm down enough to get out of his car and assess the damage, because he did sideswipe that concrete marker. And when he got out and looked, he saw the damage was actually kind of bad. There was 2 flat tires and the whole side of his car was totally smashed up and scraped. But ultimately, Carl really didn't care. He genuinely felt thankful to be alive. Later that morning, Carl sat at a diner just a few miles down the road, eating some breakfast and reading the morning paper. A passing car had pulled over and helped him patch up his own car just enough to drive to the meeting and then also drive to this diner to get something to eat. Carl still felt very rattled from nearly getting into a very likely fatal car accident. But even more than just the fact that he nearly died is Carl now was thinking a lot about that voice that had yelled in his ear and had woken him up and essentially saved him from smashing into the concrete marker. But what really stood out to him was that this voice had not called him Carl. It didn't say, "Carl, wake up." The voice had said, "Guy, watch out." Guy, called him Guy, and Guy was not his name. But Carl actually had a childhood friend named Peter who called him Guy as a nickname. He was like the only person who called Carl Guy. And as Carl thought about this voice, he started to think that the sound of the voice really sounded an awful lot like Peter. And so it sounds like Peter, and they're calling me Guy, like, was that Peter talking to me? Like, that didn't make any sense. Now, keep in mind, what Carl was actually thinking is like his subconscious has like channeled a voice to save himself. He's not literally thinking that, his friend Peter is sitting in the back seat telling him to watch out, but he's just thinking to himself, Carl is, why wouldn't it be like my mom or like, a relative, coming in and saving my life if it's my subconscious doing it? Why Peter? Like, Peter was so random if that's what it was. Carl and Peter had kind of drifted apart as they grew up. I mean, they were still in touch, but Carl lived in Kansas and Peter was in the military serving at a naval air base in Texas. Like, there was no special reason why Carl would hear Peter's voice instead of somebody else. It felt like a completely random thing. Eventually, Carl's thinking that it just must have been my brain firing off in this panicked moment trying to save my life, and for one reason or another, it came through as like Peter's voice calling me Guy, whatever. And so ultimately, Carl just went back to eating his breakfast and reading the newspaper. But when he flipped the page over and looked at the headline of the next page, he froze. The news story was actually about Carl's childhood friend, Peter. Peter had just died in this horrific military training accident. Specifically, he had died in a crash just hours before Carl heard the sound of some man's voice saying, "Guy, look out." The only person that ever called Carl Guy was Peter. And so Carl could never explain how or why any of this happened. But what he always believed is that in death, his friend Peter saved his life. One morning in July of 1997, a man named Abdel Sadr Bedawi laid in a hospital bed in El Menufia, Egypt, which is northwest of Cairo. And he felt horrible, but this was nothing new. So Bedawi was in his 60s, and unfortunately, he spent a lot of time in hospitals because he had chronic liver disease. It made him feel weak and tired and caused him to get really bloated and vomit pretty often. But recently, Bedawi had begun experiencing some new and even more concerning symptoms. Most recently, he'd come into the hospital because he was feeling really clumsy and disoriented. It seemed like his liver disease was getting so advanced that he was now experiencing symptoms in his brain as well. So that morning, Bedawi was on a whole bunch of medications to try to treat his liver disease, but so far, it felt like the medication really wasn't doing much of anything. He still had all the symptoms he had come in with. And so feeling really disheartened, he's just laying in his bed. There's nobody else in his hospital room. And so he's just trying to get through it minute by minute. And as he's laying there, he starts to feel really lightheaded, like way more lightheaded than he had felt at all at any point while he was at the hospital. And it was so extreme, so fast that he was going to call out for a nurse, but it was like he couldn't even make a sound. It was like his body was shutting down. And then it was like everything went black. At some point later, could have been minutes later, hours later, days later, Bedawi had no idea. But he had the sensation of waking up. Except when he opened his eyes, everything was still totally black, like he can't see anything. But in this kind of weird sensation of coming back to reality, he quickly was able to sort of feel that he still had all his limbs. He could feel his whole body lying flat on some surface, which could have been the bed he was still on. He didn't know. But he's thinking to himself, I'm alive. I can tell I'm alive. I can't see. I don't know where I am. I don't know what happened to me, but I'm still alive. But when he tried to move, it was like he felt trapped. It's like he couldn't quite tell if he was literally physically being confined in some space or if he was paralyzed. He didn't know. He just couldn't move. And so suddenly he has this wave of claustrophobia come over him that he needs to escape, and he starts screaming out for help. And eventually somebody heard him. It would turn out 12 hours earlier, when Bedoui was laying in his bed and he could still see, and he suddenly had this extreme lightheadedness come over him, and then it all went black for the first time. Well, what was actually happening is he was going into a very deep coma. It was because of his liver disease and other ailments he had, but he goes into this really deep coma. The hospital he was at, they didn't recognize it as a coma. They thought Bedoui had actually died. And so they put him in a coffin and they put him in the refrigerator. And that's where he was when he woke up hours later. He was literally in a coffin. And the reason he couldn't move is because he was in a coffin and was physically restricted in that space. And so he starts screaming out. He's totally claustrophobic. And there were employees that actually just happened to be near the door of the walk-in fridge where all the other coffins and bodies were. And they heard him. They walked inside and they saw one of the bodies is literally sitting up in their coffin. And so when Bedoui realized what had happened here, he jumped out of the coffin and ran out of the room, vowing to never come back to the hospital. But that's not the end of the story. One of the hospital employees who went into the fridge and saw Bedoui sitting up in his coffin basically was one of the people who freed Bedoui. They were so shocked by what they saw. Remember, they don't know that he was still alive. They think they've walked into the fridge and a dead person is sitting up like a zombie and is now like talking to them and running out of the room. That was so terrifying for them that they literally had a heart attack and died. And where were they placed after they were dead? In Bedoui's literal coffin.
Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. This series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity. This is the necklace today. It comes with a bracelet. I love it so much. I also really like to use this one as stack because it's longer than my other necklaces. Also, please ignore the more prominent bags under my eyes today. I'm running on 3 hours of sleep. Now onto the story. This happened a few nights ago and then again last night, and I can't shake it. Yeah, it's still pretty fresh. Over the last few years, all of my grandparents have passed away one by one, and then 2 years ago, my father passed away. Our whole family has been struck with grief, as one would be. My mom has always been very into tarot and mediumship, and has had a few encounters with spirit. I think I've leaned in more on the side of believing in spirit because it has made losing my father and my grandfather, who was more of a father figure to me at times than my dad was, a lot easier to cope with. I've asked for signs over the years, and I've been happy to receive some. They've never scared me, but have made me feel closer to them. However, a few days ago, I woke up around 11:45 p.m. and barely had my eyes open only to see 2 figures standing at the end of my bed, a female and a male. Ma'am, sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to get the fuck out of my humble abode. Thanks. The female I couldn't really make out, but the male was standing right next to her with his hands in his pockets, wearing jeans and a red shirt tucked in. Both just looking at me. Why do ghosts have to be such fucking creepers? My grandfather was notorious for wearing outfits that resembled exactly that. I rubbed my eyes and opened them wider, and the figures had disappeared. I'd chalked it up to just being a dream and went back to bed. A few hours later, however, I woke up and again a female figure was standing on the edge of my bed, staring right at me. What is the reason? If you want to say something, say it. Rubbed my eyes and she was gone. I'd like to hope that it was my grandma and grandfather, but still pretty freaky. Last night, my partner woke me up at around 3:43 a.m. and said, "Do you hear that?" I listened for a second and realized it was my phone. I grabbed my phone and it was playing Spotify, "I'm Not Afraid" by Eminem. I'm fucking terrified. The exact opposite of Miss Gloria Gaynor, if you will. I don't know about you, Ghost, but I'm afraid now. Twin. I'd woken up a few hours prior to that and my phone was not playing any music. It was just sitting locked on the charger, so it's not like it was still playing my playlist from before I went to bed and I didn't realize. It just randomly turned on, just hoping that it's my family playing some fun pranks on me in the afterlife and not the old man who died in our bedroom before we moved in. Why didn't you mention that before? Because now that you say that, I'm gonna assume that that's who it was. Anyway, ugh. Rated on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. Creepy, spooky. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. I will see you all the next episode. Stay spooky, friends.
One of the things I often tell people is do not play with a Ouija board, because Ouija boards are essentially a doorway. And when you open that door, anything can come through. It's almost like setting up this beacon up in the air, and you are inviting everything to come into your life. Now, I heard this story. There was this young boy named Colton, and Colton and his buddies decided they were going to play with a Ouija board one night. And, they had fun. They didn't know how this pendulum was moving by itself, and, it kind of thrilled them and everything, but they didn't think anything of it. So Colton, he takes the Ouija board and he puts it in his closet. Later that night, when he's sleeping, he starts hearing like a banging sound in his closet. And all of a sudden, when he jumps up out of bed, he looks over at his closet and the door slowly opens. And he gets up and looks in the closet. There's no one in there. So he's like, that's kind of weird. But he kind of shakes it off, right? The next night, when he's in his bedroom once again, right? He's laying down in his bed. He can't sleep. All of a sudden, he hears this banging sound again coming from the closet. And the closet door opens by itself. The next morning, when he wakes up, he finds the Ouija board is sitting on his bed. So he thinks, you know what? I am done with this Ouija board. I shouldn't have messed with it. I'm done with this. So he takes it out back and he starts a fire. And he starts trying to burn this Ouija board. As he's burning this thing and it's on fire, he hears just disembodied voices. He hears screams. And he thinks, okay, this thing is just ashes now. Everything's fine. Well, it was for a couple weeks, nothing happened. Until one night, he wakes up and he said he just felt like the air was very thick. And he had his bedroom door open at the time. Well, all of a sudden, his bedroom door slams shut and his bed just starts shaking violently. And he said, it felt like there was an earthquake. He jumps out of bed and stuff on his shelf just starts flying at him across the room. And so he, is running to the door, trying to get the door open, but something is holding it shut. He starts screaming, for his parents. And when his parents come, the door unlocks. He opens the door and he tells his parents, what had happened. They don't believe him. So he said, things just kept getting significantly worse. And every night he was just tormented by something. And he said, about 6-7 months into this happening, right, this thing tormenting him, he goes over to his grandma's house one day. And when he walks into his grandma's house and stuff, he starts talking to her and he looks over on a shelf. She has a Ouija board on the shelf. And he's like, wait a second, that is the Ouija board that I burned in the fire, the box and everything. And he goes, Grandma, where did you get that? Do you know what that is? And she goes, oh, no, honey, someone left a board game on my front door. And so I brought it in, but I couldn't figure out how to play it. And he said, give me that. And he grabbed it and he takes off running with it, right? So he takes it out into the woods. He buries this thing. And he thinks, okay, maybe this is the end of it. And once again, same thing. Every night, just stuff is happening. Stuff's flying across the room. His bed is shaking, He starts waking up with scratches all over his body. He starts smelling a very foul sulfur smell in his room. And so he goes to a person who is a paranormal investigator and says, what do I do? I ever since I've messed with this Ouija board, something has been following me and attached to me. And this paranormal investigator said, well, basically, you need to go take this Ouija board and, say that I renounce you. I do not accept you into my life. I am not inviting you. You need to leave. So he goes back out into the woods where he had buried this Ouija board, except it's dug up and it's not there anymore. And so he said, after that, it sort of, everything stopped for a little while. It came back, but it was very sporadic. But he said still to this day, like, stuff happens to him from messing with the Ouija board.
Get ready with me while I tell you this ghost story. We're not going to talk about the hairpins, okay? We will only talk about the hairpins. If at the end my hair turns out right, it'll be great. We can talk about it. If not, it never happened. Back when I was in grade 8 and 9, I became completely obsessed with the paranormal. Ghosts, spirits, anything forbidden, I wanted all of it. A lot of that came from my girlfriend at the time. She was really into Wicca, and before I knew it, she had introduced me to a Ouija board. Oh no. At first it felt harmless, just curiosity, just kids messing around. But it didn't stay that way. Of course it didn't. We started using the board every single day. And after about a month, something strange happened. Every time we asked the same question, who are we speaking with? The answer never changed. Oh no. The planchette would slide across the board and spell out the word him. At first we laughed it off. We weren't scared yet, but over time, him started getting aggressive. The board would curse at us, tell us to fuck off. The energy in the room felt heavier every time we played. Stop. Stop. One day it got under my skin. I got angry, and in the middle of a session, I flipped the board off of the table and stormed away. After that, I stopped playing for a while, but whatever we'd contacted didn't stop. A few weeks later, I was working a night shift at Walmart stocking shelves. The store was quiet, just the low hum of fluorescent lights and distant footsteps. Then I heard it. A whisper. My name. Oh no. I froze. I told myself I imagined it until it happened again. Louder this time. I checked the next aisle, expecting to catch someone messing with me, but it was empty. When I heard my name a third time, loud enough to echo down the aisle, I snapped. I yelled, "Hello? Who the fuck is calling my name?" Nothing or no one answered. Work? About 40 seconds later, a coworker approached me. She looked pale, shaken. She asked if I had just heard my name being called 3 times. What? When I said yes, she swallowed hard and told me, completely seriously, that she was a medium and that hearing your name called 3 times was a sign someone in your family was about to die. I tried to laugh it off. I was into paranormal stuff, but I was still skeptical. I changed the subject and started talking about my future, plans, goals, and where I wanted my life to go. She interrupted me mid-sentence. She stared at me and said, "Every time you talk about your future, I hear something snickering. Something negative. It's attached to you and trying to ruin your plans." She had no idea about the Ouija board. The blood drained from my face. That night, I went home and fell into bed, exhausted. Hours later, I woke up to the sound of the house phone ringing. I heard my mom in the hallway saying, "Oh no, that's terrible, I'm so sorry. Who died? Who died?" Before she even hung up, I was downstairs asking what had happened. Someone in our family had just died. I barely knew them, but the timing had shattered me. Instead of scaring me away, though, it ended up pulling me deeper. Oh, what? A few days later, I invited my girlfriend and my best friend over. My parents weren't home. We went into the basement and brought out the Ouija board. Okay, what are we doing? This would be the last time I touched one for years. We'd been playing for about 20 minutes when something strange happened. All 3 of us smelled it at the same time. Breakfast sausage, strong, greasy, and freshly cooked. It made no sense. No one was home. No food had been made. We asked the board if that smell was him, and the answer was yes. Later, my parents came home and made dinner. We ate, then went right back downstairs. This time, we were reckless. We demanded proof. Asked it to touch us. Then I did something I regret to this day. I asked the board if it could possess my girlfriend. Planchette snapped to yes, faster than I'd ever seen it move. Then it began counting down. 3, 2, 1. The light bulb above us started buzzing, flickering, and then it went out. Complete darkness. I screamed and bolted upstairs. As I reached the living room, I saw the sky flash pure white through the window. The transformer across the street had blown. What? My friend was still downstairs, swearing, after slamming into a wall trying to escape. Where is your girlfriend? In the chaos, I forgot about my girlfriend. Are you? 20 seconds later, she walked up the stairs calmly. Blank expression, no fear at all. As she passed me, she muttered something quiet and in a voice several octaves deeper than her own. I asked her what she said. She looked at me confused and said, "What?" She did the same thing to my friend. I told her to go home. She lived just around the block. She walked out like nothing had happened. My friend and I slept with the light on for a month. I actually ran away from home that night because I was so terrified.
So who was Robert Eugene Brashers? The name didn't mean much to the public at first, until investigators started piecing together his past. Brashers lived a double life. On paper, he was a husband, a father, and a military veteran. But beneath that facade, he was one of the most violent predators moving across the American South during the late 1980s and 1990s. He has been linked to multiple assaults and murders in Missouri, Arkansas, and Tennessee, including the 1998 killings of Sherry and Megan Schweitzer, a mother and daughter, and the 1990 of a woman in Memphis. His crimes followed a pattern: forced entry, assault, and then murder. Fast, organized, and terrifyingly methodical. And he didn't linger or taunt police. He vanished, and it's what made him so hard to catch. When investigators finally connected those dots, they realized he'd been there all along.
Did you guys know that Michael Jackson's death was ruled a homicide? Because I didn't until now. I don't know how I didn't, but I didn't. In June of 2009, Michael Jackson left the studio and headed back to a mansion that he was renting in LA. His personal doctor, Conrad Robert Murray, arrived at that same mansion just after midnight. Hours later, a 911 call would be made, and Michael Jackson, one of the most famous and influential entertainers in history, the king of pop, would be gone. At the time of his passing in 2009, Michael Jackson was 50 years old and at critical crossroads. He was deeply in debt, like $500 million in debt, facing potential financial ruin, and desperately trying to think of the different options that he had in regards to his reputation and career. After sort of being away from the spotlight and not having gone on tour in over a decade, in July of 2009, Michael Jackson announced 50 This Is It concerts. He was going back on tour. And don't get me wrong, he was still arguably the most famous person. He just hadn't performed live in a while, but he was ready to. However, there were some things that he just couldn't ignore. He was physically and mentally struggling under the pressure of intensive rehearsals, while at the same time battling chronic, debilitating insomnia that he had struggled with for years. He couldn't sleep ever, and that sucked day to day, but even more so while he was on tour. So he needed to do something about it if he wanted to be able to perform to the best of his ability, because the entire world was counting on him, which is when Michael Jackson decided to call up Dr. Conrad Murray. Conrad Robert Murray was a cardiologist. By 2009, he was deep in debt, juggling multiple practices across states and struggling financially. He had issues of his own. He got around, let's just say that. He had 7 different kids with 6 different baby mamas. He was also married, I'm pretty sure. But instead of being a loyal husband, Dr. Murray liked to go out for a lot of late nights to meet up with a lot of different ladies and spend a lot of money. His lifestyle left him with multiple lawsuits and over $700,000 in debt because he had not paid for child support. Michael Jackson and Dr. Murray had previously met in Vegas, but in 2009, when Michael Jackson announced his comeback, he called up Dr. Murray to say, "Hey, I will hire you to be my own personal physician throughout the entirety of my tour, and I will pay you $150,000 per month." Dr. Murray needed the money. He also liked the flex of being able to say that he was Michael Jackson's personal doctor, so he didn't hesitate when he agreed to it. And just like that, in 2009, Dr. Murray officially joined Michael Jackson's team on tour. In order to be able to get through rehearsals and rest and function properly during the tour that Michael Jackson saw as his last chance to reclaim his name, not that he lost
lost it, but to reclaim his throne as the king of pop and save himself from complete financial collapse, he needed to be able to sleep, but he couldn't. So he tells Dr. Murray, listen, dude, you're gonna have to give me something that helps me, something strong. Propofol. And Dr. Murray, against the medical knowledge that he had that should have made him turn down Michael Jackson's request, he says, sure, I'll give it to you. You're paying me $150,000 a month. Who am I to deny your request? He agrees to give him propofol. In fact, he agrees to give it to him daily through an IV drip at the end of the day when Michael was done with all of his tour prep stuff. Propofol is an extremely powerful surgical anesthetic, aka what doctors use in hospitals during surgeries to completely put people under. It requires constant monitoring because it lowers your blood pressure and suppresses your breathing because you're practically put in a coma and patients can't stop breathing. So the most important thing when using propofol is not to take your eyes off the patient in case they stop breathing. In an interview later on after the fact, Dr. Murray tells authorities that he had been giving Michael Jackson a whole bunch of things mixed together through an IV to help put him to sleep every single night, a practice that violates every standard of medical care, by the way. And the night of June 24th going into the 25th, he did exactly that, but Michael Jackson was still unable to sleep. Dr. Murray was giving him a whole bunch of things to help him sleep from 1:30 in the morning to 10:40 in the morning, and according to him, Michael Jackson was begging and crying for propofol. So that morning he gave it to him in addition to everything else that he had already given him, and then he walked away, leaving Michael Jackson alone in bed unattended. He looked through his emails, responded to some, then he switched over to his phone, started making some phone calls. At 11:18 a.m., Dr. Murray called a Vegas phone number for 32 minutes. At 11:49 a.m., he called another Vegas number for 3 minutes, and at 11:51 a.m., he called someone else for 11 minutes. It wasn't until approximately noon, 12 p.m., when Dr. Murray returned to Michael Jackson and noticed that he wasn't breathing. He also had a very, very weak pulse, if any. Dr. Murray panicked. He began performing CPR, but he did it wrong. He did chest compressions on him while Michael Jackson was still in bed, when CPR is supposed to, I think, require a hard surface. What did he not do? He did not immediately call 911. Instead, when the CPR wasn't working, Dr. Murray called for Michael Jackson's security guard, who then rushed upstairs to the bedroom. Together, the two of them tried to hide as much evidence as they could, grabbing medicine vessels from the nightstands, putting them in blue bags, getting rid of those, also removing the propofol from the IV bag, and only after cleaning everything up does security finally call 911. Reports vary as far as how much time actually went by between finding Michael Jackson and calling 911. Some reports say between 21 and 30 minutes, other reports say between 25 and 83 minutes, which would be over an hour, which is crazy. So Michael Jackson's security called 911. Paramedics were dispatched to the mansion after receiving a report of a 50-year-old man who had stopped breathing. When they arrived, they walked in thinking, this guy's 50 years old. He should be in good enough health, meaning that as long as we get to him in time, we should be able to save him. But they walked into a room full of medical equipment, and next to the 50-year-old man was his doctor. It was only after authorities showed up that they realized that the patient was the Michael Jackson. And as soon as they laid eyes on him, they knew that they were late. They knew that they should have been called out to that house sooner. Michael Jackson was taken to the Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center. He passed away at the age of 50 years old. And by the time that some investigators arrived at the hospital, Dr. Murray was nowhere to be found. At first, no one thought that his passing could have been a homicide, but after a while, because of some things that were said on top of Dr. Murray's sus behavior, questions began circulating. And in August of 2009, the coroner officially ruled his death a homicide. It was the propofol in his system that caused it. The other medications he was given only made it worse. DEA agents, LAPD detectives, and Houston police raided Dr. Murray's Houston medical office. They seized his computer, medical documents, and prescription records, and ultimately he was charged with involuntary manslaughter, to which he pleaded not guilty to. This was huge news all over the world, as you can imagine. It was everything that anyone was talking about. Dr. Murray's trial began in 2011, and it was televised. The prosecution's key arguments being that Dr. Murray gave Michael Jackson a hospital-grade anesthetic in an unmonitored home setting. He left Michael Jackson alone after administering it. He failed to call 911 for at least 20 minutes. He lied to paramedics and ER doctors about what he had given him. He kept no medical records, and he was reckless, greedy, and incompetent. Prosecutors stated, quote, misplaced trust in the hands of Murray cost Jackson his life, end quote. Ultimately, Dr. Murray refused to accept any responsibility at all. He pleaded not guilty, but he was found guilty and sentenced to 4 years in prison, which was, from my understanding, the maximum sentence allowed. The judge called Murray, quote, a disgrace to the medical profession, and said that he showed no remorse, no acceptance of responsibility, and that he had engaged in, quote, a cycle of horrible medicine. In October of 2013, Dr. Murray was released after only serving 2 years. He did lose his medical licenses in California, Nevada, and Texas, and he went on to publish a memoir called called This Is It, where he again talked about Michael Jackson and his passing. And get this, in 2022, the Nevada State Board of Medical Examiners allowed Dr. Murray to retain his medical license. In 2023, he opened up DCM Medical Institute, where he now practices medicine. Yeah. I also was thinking about doing an entire deep dive on Michael Jackson, so let me know if that's something that you guys would be interested in. But that is all for me today. Thank you for spending time with me today. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Also, new podcast episode is out, so go check that out if you haven't. Anyway, I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.